Let us start with the requirements to be considered as a customer. There are some requirements or some conditions that needs to be qualified or that needs to be fulfilled to qualify as a customer of the bank. The first is ownership of a bank account. The foundational requirement is the establishment of a bank account in the customer's name. That means, in order to be a customer of the bank or any financial institution, a person must establish a bank account in his name. This account serves as the nexus through which financial transactions are initiated and processed. As you have already studied that banks are the financial institutions and possess financial transactions. Hence, it is the basic facility provided by the bank to conduct financial transactions and to be the customer of the bank. It is the foundational requirement for any purpose, any person, individual, client, or any business to establish a bank account in his name. This account would serve as a nexus through which all the financial transactions are initiated and processed. There are various kinds of bank accounts that a customer can establish. The first is saving account. Saving account is designed for individuals looking to save money while earning interest on their deposits. Saving accounts typically allow for periodic withdrawals and offer a degree of liquidity. Any person who has some spare amount of money and wants to save can open a saving account and can withdraw and deposit money as and when required. Saving accounts offer a little rate of interest on the savings. Next is current account. Current account is generally opened by business firms or businessmen. This account is tailored for businesses or individuals with frequent financial transactions. Current accounts offer services to have frequent financial transactions, unlike saving accounts. Current accounts often do not accrue interest. Saving accounts provide a little interest, but current accounts do not accrue any kind of interest. But they provide flexibility in terms of transaction volumes and usage. The third is fixed deposit. Fixed deposit involves depositing a specified amount of money for a predetermined period at a higher rate of interest. Fixed deposits are generally limited for the period of 5 years at least, not minimum. Basically, minimum 5 years of fixed deposit tenure is required. The rate of interest offered in fixed deposits is higher as compared to saving accounts. Fixed deposits are suitable for individuals who seek higher rate of interest. Then, next is nature of banking business. The relationship between the customer and banks must encompass transactions that fall within the purview of banking activities. That means the customer and the bank can only involve in the transactions that fall within the purview of banking activities. These activities include depositing funds, withdrawing money, applying for loans, utilizing credit facilities, exploring investment opportunities, and seeking financial advice. That means Banks offer services like depositing funds, withdrawing money, applying for loans, utilizing credit facilities, exploring investment opportunities, and seeking financial advice. Apart from these services, no other services can be provided by the bank that do not fall under the purview of banking activities. These activities delineate the scope and nature of customers' engagement with the bank. That means a customer must utilize these services in order to have engagement with the banks. These services are provided by the banks to offer satisfaction towards its customers. Formulation of customer-bank relationship carries legal and operational implications that underscore the importance of clarity, transparency, and adherence to regulatory framework. That means to have a customer-bank relationship, there should be legal and operational implications that underscore clarity, transparency, and adherence to regulatory framework. The establishment of a bank account formalizes the legal standing of the customer within the banking system, entitling them to certain rights and protection under banking laws and regulations. Customers are obligated to adhere to terms and conditions stipulated by the bank, including maintaining minimum balances, fulfilling loan repayment, and complying with the regulatory requirements. Banks are duty bound to provide agreed upon banking services efficiently, securely, and in accordance with applicable laws. This includes safeguarding customer deposits, processing transactions promptly, and offering responsive customer support. So, we have discussed the requirements to be qualified as a customer, that is the ownership of a bank account. That means a person should possess or establish a bank account in his name. Bank accounts can be of three types: saving accounts that offer a very little amount of interest and typically designed to save money and to fulfill day-to-day transactions. Next is current account that is generally opened by business firms or businessmen because it provides flexibility in number of transactions. The third one is fixed deposit that is generally open for a minimum term of 5 years and offers a very high rate of interest. Then we have discussed nature of banking business. That means banks provide services to its customer within the purview of banking activities like depositing funds, withdrawing money, applying for loans, utilizing credit facilities, exploring investment opportunities, and seeking financial advice. These activities delineate the scope and nature of the customer's engagement with the bank. So, to conclude, the designation of a customer within the banking sector signifies more than mere account ownership. It involves a formalized relationship that is built on mutual agreement between banks and its customers, the rights and responsibilities as well. Customers benefit from a spectrum of financial services while banks fulfill their role as financial intermediaries, fostering economic stability and growth. Understanding the key characteristics and requirements for qualifying as a customer is essential for navigating the complexities and modern banking finance, ensuring that both individuals and institutions uphold the integrity and efficacy of the financial system. This can only be done when the certain regulatory measures and framework is established by the banking system and the customers would foster their trust and offer their loyalty towards the bank. I hope the concept of bank relationship and the customer relationship with the banks is clear. Let us move on further towards the next topic, that is relationship between the banks and its customers. There is a great relationship between the bank and its customers, as bank offers many of the services to its clients. There are two set of relationships that we are going to discuss in this unit, that is general relationship and special relationships in banking. First, let us talk in detail about the general relationships. Bankers occupy a pivotal role within the financial ecosystem. Bankers have a very important role because they are serving as intermediaries between depositors and borrowers. Depositors have sufficient funds and borrowers are people who lack funds or who are in need of funds for some project management, development or any other kind of venture. So banks have a very keen role in serving as intermediaries between depositors and borrowers while managing various financial transactions and relationships. The interactions between bankers and their customers is governed by complex framework of legal principles and fiduciary duties. That means bankers and the customers have a specific complex framework according to which there are certain principles to be followed and there are some fiduciary duties and some rights and responsibilities are given to each of them. That means to both the customers as well as the banks. This expansive exploration dwells into the nuanced relationship that define banking, encompassing both general as well as special relationships, alongside the legal and ethical obligations that guide bankers in their daily operations. Let us have a detailed look on the general relationships. The first is the relationship of debtor and creditor. In the foundational relationship between a bank and its customers, the dynamics of debtor and creditor come into play. That means this is the first and foremost relationship that is established between a banker and its customer or a bank and its customer, because when a customer opens a bank account, it is his first and foremost step to deposit funds. They assume the role of a creditor to the bank because as soon as the money is deposited from the customer to the bank or into his bank account, the customer becomes creditor to the bank. This essentially means that the bank owes the customer the deposited amount and is obligated to repay it upon demand or as per the terms outlined in the account agreement. That means the customer who is a creditor can demand his money anytime or can get his money back as per the terms outlined in the account agreement. The customers entrust their money to the bank for safekeeping, expecting the bank to manage it responsibly and prudentially. That means customers only deposit their funds for safekeeping and they also get a little interest on their savings. Conversely, from bank's perspective, they become the debtor in this scenario because they owe the money to its customers. The bank holds deposits entrusted by customers and must utilize these funds in accordance with banking regulations and ethical standards. This obligation encompasses safeguarding the deposits and ensuring liquidity for customer withdrawal and deploying the funds in permissible avenues such as loans and investments that align with regulatory framework. So, the first and foremost relationship between the bankers or between the bank and its customers is the relationship of debtor and creditor, where the person or the individual becomes the creditor and the banks become the debtor. The second is the relationship between banks and the customers is pledger and pledgee. The relationship of pledger and pledgee arises when customers pledge goods, documents or securities like shares or bonds as collateral for obtaining a loan or credit facility from the bank. As the pledger, the customer offers these assets as security. That means when the customers pledge goods, documents, securities as collateral for obtaining loan or a credit from the bank. The customer offers these assets as security that allows the bank to provide them credit without the immediate need to liquidate their valuable possessions. That means the customers do not need to liquidate their possessions. Rather, they can deposit it, pledge them with the banks in exchange of goods. The banks in turn assumes the role of the pledgee, holding the pledged items as collateral until the customer fulfills their debt obligations or meets the agreed upon conditions. That means the bank has to have the role of a pledgee or has to play the role of a pledgee, holding the pledged items until the customer fulfills their debt obligations or the customer meets up the agreed upon conditions. This arrangement serves dual purpose. That means the person or the customers have to secure financial based on their existing assets while mitigating the risk for the bank by having tangible collateral. The banks retain possessions of the pledged assets until the loan is repaid, ensuring that it has recourse in case of default by the customers. So, the second relationship is the relationship between bank and its customers or the documents or any kind of goods in exchange of loans, and banks accept these as collateral or security of goods from bailor to bailee is done with the basic motive of safekeeping, storage or specific use under agreed terms. Customers may deposit their valuable items such as jewelry, important documents or grant security interest in property, that is real estate, or to the banks for safekeeping as a part of securing a loan. So, bailment in terms of banking involves transfer of goods or assets from bailor to bailee with the purpose of safekeeping, storage or specific use under agreed terms. As a bailee, the bank assumes responsibility for holding these items securely and managing them in accordance with the terms specified by the customer. Bailment in context of banking involves transfer of goods or assets from one party, that is bailor, to another party, that is bailey, for the purpose of safekeeping, storage, or specific use. Customers deposit valuable items like jewelry, important documents, or grant security interest in property to the banks for safekeeping or as a part of securing a loan. As the bailee, the bank assumes responsibility for holding these items securely and managing them in accordance with terms specified by the customers. The banks may return the deposited item upon the customer's request or after fulfilling the agreed upon conditions, ensuring that the assets are safeguarded and accessible when needed. So, here the customer acts as a bailer and transfers the goods to the bank, who acts as a bailee. Moving on towards the next relationship is the relationship of leaser and leasing. Banks often engage in leasing transactions where they lease out immovable properties such as office spaces, storage facilities, or even equipments to customers under lease agreements. That means leasing transactions take place in the banks while they lease immovable property. Immovable property includes office spaces, storage facilities, and equipments to customers. In the relationship of leaser and leasee, the bank acts as a leaser, granting the customer leasee the rights to use the property for a specified period in exchange for periodic rental payments. That means banks acts as a leaser and grants the leasee, who is the customer, the rights to use the property for a specified period of time and in exchange of periodic rental payments. The lease agreement outlines the rights and obligations of both parties. That means the agreement of lease contains the rights and obligations of both the leaser, that means the bank, and the leasing, that means the customer, including maintenance responsibilities, permissible use of the leased property, duration of the lease, and termination conditions. The lease agreements contains all the responsibilities that is related to maintenance, the uses of the leased property that are permissible, the duration of the lease agreement, and the conditions under which the lease agreement can be terminated. This arrangement allows customer to access needed facilities without the upfront capital expenditure required for purchasing real estate or equipment outright. I hope the relationship of leaser and leasing is clear. Leaser is the person that is bank in this relationship who offers immovable property for use to the leasee, that means to its clients, for a specified period of time in exchange of periodic rental payments. Moving on towards the next relationship is the relationship of trustee and beneficiary. Trustee and beneficiary is a relationship when customer entrusts funds or assets to the banks for management or safekeeping. When the customer entrusts his fund or assets to the bank for management or safekeeping, the bank assumes the role of a trustee. As a trustee, the bank holds and manages these assets in accordance with legal and fiduciary duties, ensuring that they are used for the benefit of customers, who is the beneficiary of the trust relationship. That means banks acts as a trustee to hold and manage the assets that is provided by the customer according to the legal and fiduciary duties, Banks also ensure that these assets are used for the benefit of the customer, because the customer is the beneficiary of the trust relationship. Trust arrangements can vary widely in scope as well as in purpose, ranging from managing investments on behalf of clients to administering estates or holding funds interest for specific purpose such as educational or charitable endeavors. The bank's fiduciary duty requires it to act in the best interest of the beneficiary, manage the assets prudently, and adhere to the legal guidelines governing trust administration. Hence, in the relationship of trustee and beneficiary, the customers entrust funds to the bank acts as a trustee, and the customer becomes the beneficiary who is benefited from this trust relationship. I hope the general relationships are clear. Moving on towards the special relationships, the first is obligation of the banker to honor checks. One of the fundamental obligations of banks is to honor checks drawn on customers' account. That means banks can honor checks that are drawn on the account of customer, provided there are sufficient funds available or within an agreed overdraft limit. That means banks can honor checks up to the sufficient funds available or up to an agreed amount of overdraft limit. This obligation ensures the efficient processing of payments and transactions initiated by customers. It also helps in facilitating commerce and financial transactions. That means banks have the obligation to honor checks drawn on customers' name up to the amount of funds available or within a specified overdraft limit. This ensures efficient processing of payments and transactions initiated by customers, facilitating commerce and financial transactions. Banks must maintain robust system and procedures to verify the authenticity of checks. To verify authenticity of checks, ensure compliance with regulatory requirements such as funds availability, and promptly process payments to the intended payers. That means banks should maintain robust systems and procedures to verify authenticity of checks, to ensure compliance with regulatory requirements such as funds availability and prompt process of payments to the intended payers. By honoring checks, the banks uphold the trust and reliability of the banking system, enabling customers to conduct business transactions smoothly and securely. That means the basic obligation of banks is to honor checks. By doing this, bank upholds the trust and reliability of the banking system that enables customer or the different customers to conduct business transactions smoothly and securely. Moving on towards the next relationship is the relationship of obligation of bankers to maintain confidentiality. Confidentiality is the paramount in banking, where banks are entrusted with sensitive financial information pertaining to their customers. Banks are legally and ethically obligated to maintain strict confidentiality regarding customers' financial details, including account numbers, balances, transaction history, and other personal information. That means it is a legal and ethical obligation of bank to maintain strict confidentiality towards customers' financial details, including account number, balances, transaction history, and other personal information. Unauthorized disclosure of confidential information can have serious repercussions, including financial loss, identity theft, and damage to bank's reputation. Banks implement robust data protection measures, secure storage systems, and assess control to safeguard customer information from unauthorized access or disclosure. That means it is very important for the banks to maintain confidentiality towards customers' financial details like bank accounts, balance history, and other personal information. In case of unauthorized disclosure of confidential information, banks can face serious repercussions, that is financial loss, identity theft, and damage to bank's reputation as well. Moving on towards the next obligation is the obligation of banker to maintain records. Accurate and comprehensive record keeping is very important for banks to ensure regulatory compliance, facilitate auditing process, resolve customer disputes, and provide efficient customer services. That means, in order to have regulatory compliance and facilitate auditing process, it is very important for the banks to maintain accurate and comprehensive records. Banks must maintain detailed records for all financial transactions, including deposits, withdrawals, loans, investments, and other banking activities. These records serve as a crucial tool for regulatory oversight, enabling banks to demonstrate adherence to legal requirements and internal policies. Clear and transparent record-keeping practices enhance accountability, facilitate financial reporting, and build trust between banks and their customers. Hence, an accurate and comprehensive record keeping is very important for the banks to ensure regulatory compliance, facilitate auditing process, resolve customers' dispute, and provide efficient customer service. These records include details of all the financial transactions like deposits, withdrawals, loans, investments, and other banking activities. I hope the concept of obligation to maintain records is clear. The relationship and obligations outlined above underscore the legal and fiduciary responsibilities that bankers owe. Compliance with law and regulations. Banks must comply with a myriad of legal requirements, including banking laws, consumer protection regulations, and anti-money laundering. It also includes know your customer requirements. Compliance ensures the integrity and stability of the financial system while protecting the interest of customers. Banks have a duty of care towards their customers, requiring them to act prudently, honestly, and in good faith in all their dealings. This duty extends to providing accurate information, managing risk responsibly, and safeguarding customers' assets. Upholding confidentiality is a cornerstone of banking ethics, ensuring that customer information is protected from unauthorized access or disclosure. Banks must establish a stringent data protection measures and privacy policy to safeguard customers' confidentiality. Banks are responsible for managing financial risks associated with their operations, including credit risk, market risk, operational risk, compliance risk. Effective risk management practices mitigate potential losses and enhance financial stability. Hence, to conclude, the relationship between bankers and their customers are multifaceted, encompassing legal, fiduciary, and ethical dimensions that define the parameters of banking operations. Understanding these relationships is crucial for ensuring transparency, accountability, and trust within the banking sector. By fulfilling their obligations and responsibilities diligently, bankers contribute to the efficient functioning of financial markets, support economic growth, and maintain public confidence in the banking system. The evolving regulatory landscape and technological advancements continue to shape the dynamics of banking relationships, underscoring the importance of adaptability and compliance in meeting the diverse needs of customers and stakeholders in the global financial ecosystem. I hope the concept and the relationships between the bankers and its customers is really understood and clear to everyone. Is introduction to negotiable instruments. Negotiable instruments are specialized types of documents that facilitate the transfer of monetary obligations between parties. So, negotiable instruments are written documents that facilitate monetary transactions between different parties. These parties are somewhere between at least two, and there can be parties in between the transactions as well. We'll be discussing about the parties further in this unit. These instruments play a crucial role in commerce and finance by providing a secure, standardized way to transfer financial rights and obligations. That means negotiable instruments are written documents that facilitate the transfer of monetary obligations between at least two parties. These instruments play a crucial role in commerce and finance by providing a secure and standardized way to transfer financial rights and obligations. Let us have a detailed explanation of negotiable instruments and the features. A negotiable instrument is a written document that guarantees the payment of a specified amount of money. That means negotiable instrument guarantees the payment up to a specific amount that is mentioned in it. It can demand the amount anytime. That means the amount can be withdrawn either on demand or at a determined future date. Negotiable instruments allow us the transfer of right to receive money from one person to another. That means the transfer of money from the payer to the payer, from the debtor to the creditor. This transfer of money from one person to another person is really free and convenient. Negotiable instruments are governed by specific laws and regulations that ensure their reliability and enforceability in commercial transactions. Hence, any written document that guarantees a payment of specific sum, either on demand or at predetermined future date, is known as a negotiable instrument. Negotiable instrument allows transfer of the rights to receive money from the debtor to the creditor, from the payer to the payee, freely and conveniently. These are governed by specific laws, regulation, and ensure their reliability and enforceability in commercial transactions. Moving on, let us discuss the features of negotiable instruments. Features: negotiable instruments are financial documents that guarantees the payment of a specified amount of money, either on demand or at a particular set of time. They are integral to the modern financial systems and are widely used in both personal as well as in business transactions. Understanding the features of negotiable instruments is crucial for ensuring their proper use and legal enforcement. So let us explore the key features of negotiable instruments in detail. The first feature of negotiable instrument is writings in a fixed form. Negotiable instruments must be in writing and adhere to specific legal requirements regarding format and content. This requirement ensures clarity and enforceability in legal disputes. The written form provides a permanent record of the transactions which can be presented as evidence in a court of law. That means a negotiable instrument must be in a written form, adhere to specific legal requirements regarding format and content so that it can be used as a record, as a permanent record of the financial transactions and can be presented as an evidence in a court of law if it is required anytime. Let us talk about its importance of writing of a written document. The first is clarity. Written instruments remove any sort of confusion about the terms of the transactions. A written document has clearly specified laid down terms and conditions related to the transactions. Second is evidence. That means a written document serves as a tangible piece of evidence in case of any kinds of disputes. These tangible pieces of evidences can be used in case of any disputes and can be presented in court of law. Next is consistency. Standardized forms ensure uniformity and reduce errors. That means these negotiable instruments are in standardized forms that ensure uniformity and reduce any sort of errors. Next is legal requirements. That is, the written documents clearly specify the names of the payer and the payee. It also states the exact amount of money paid. It also indicates the date of issuance and, if applicable, the date of payment. Then, it must be duly signed by the person issuing the instrument. Hence, negotiable instrument is a written document that clearly lays down all the rules and terms and conditions of a specific financial transactions. It can be served as a tangible piece of evidence in case of any kinds of disputes and can also be used to present at the court of law. It serves as a standardized form which ensures uniformity and reduce errors. Written documents clearly specify the names of the payer and the payee. the exact amount to be paid, indicates the date of issuance and the date of payment if applicable, and is duly signed by the person issuing the instrument. The next feature is promise or order to pay. A negotiable instrument contains an unconditional promise or order to pay a specified amount of money. This promise or order must be clear and to be properly laid to be enforceable. There are three types of negotiable instruments, that is promissory note, bill of exchange and checks. Promissory note is a written promise by one party to pay another a definite sum of money either on demand or at a specified future date. Bill of exchange is an order by one party directing another party to pay a third party a specified sum of money on demand or at a future date. Check is a specific type of bill of exchange drawn on a bank and is payable on demand. Promise or order to pay is unconditional. That means the promise or order must not be contingent upon any event, and the payment terms must be clearly stated without any ambiguity. Hence, a negotiable instrument contains an unconditional promise to pay a specified amount of money. The promise or order must not be contingent upon any event, and the payment terms must be clearly stated without ambiguity. Moving on further, discussing the third point is the fixed amount of money. Fixed amount of money to be paid must be clearly stated and payable in a fixed and determined currency. That means whatever the amount is laid in the negotiable instrument must be paid clearly and payable at a fixed and determined currency. Any ambiguity regarding the amount can invalidate the instrument. So, the instrument should not contain any kind of ambiguities regarding the amount. It has a greater significance because it gives us precision. That means it ensures the exact amount to be paid that is known without preventing any kinds of disputes. That means a negotiable instrument has a clearly laid exact amount that is to be paid, thereby preventing any kind of disputes. And another point of significance is currency specification. That means negotiable instruments clearly indicates the currency in which the payment is to be made. For example, if a bill is drawn in India, it would contain the amount in rupees. That means rupees 1 lakh to be paid on 1st of September. But if that bill is drawn in US, it would be reading as $1 lakh to be paid in September. I hope I am very clear with this thing. Next is payment to order or bearer. A negotiable instrument is payable either to a specific person who is known as a payee or to the bearer, that is the person in possession of the instrument. Who is a bearer? Any person who has the possession of the instrument is known as the bearer. So, a negotiable instrument is payable either to the bearer or the specific payee. There are types of instruments, that is order instruments and bearer instruments. Order instruments are payable to a specific person or their order. on their orders, that is paid to human or order. Bearer instruments are payable to the bearers. It contains words such as pay to bearer. There are features of these instruments. First is transferability. Order instruments require endorsement by the payee, while bearer instruments do. That means if I want to endorse an order instrument, I need to write the endorsement, but a bearer instrument does not need any kind of endorsements mentioned. Security. Order instruments are more secure because they require endorsement for transfers, while bearer instruments does not provide any kind of security. Moving on towards the next is transferability. Negotiable instruments are designed to be easily transferable from one person to another. That means we can easily transfer any negotiable instrument from one person to another. This can be done by delivery or endorsement. Delivery means handing over the instrument to another person. That means if I possess a bill and I am handing it to somebody else, this is known as delivery. It can also be transferred through endorsement. Endorsement means signing on the back of the instrument to transfer ownership. There are three types of endorsement we are discussing right now. That is blank endorsement. The endorser signs their name, making instrument payable to the bearer. Does not contain any name of the bearer. Next is special endorsement. That means this endorsement specifies the person to whom the instrument is payable. Like if I am endorsing the bill to Smith, I will be writing pay to Smith. Next is restricted endorsement. That means it limits the use of instrument. For example, if I would be writing for deposit only, so I have restricted this endorsement. Moving on towards the next point is consideration. Like any other contract, negotiable instruments require consideration. That means value to be exchanged between parties. Without consideration or value to be exchanged, there cannot be any sort of negotiable instruments. The issuance or transfer of negotiable instrument must be supported by a valid consideration. That means negotiable instruments should possess consideration or exchange value between parties. The issuance or transfer of an instrument must be supported by valid consideration. Let us understand the concept of consideration a little brief. First is value received. Value received indicates that the instrument was issued in exchange for value. Next is legal requirement. It ensures the transaction is legally binding. Let us discuss the implications. First is defenses. In case of non-payments, the holders must prove that the instrument was issued for valuable consideration. That means, in case of non-payments, the holder must prove that the instrument was issued for valuable consideration and it is used as in case of defense. Then transfer of rights. The transferee must have given the value for the instrument to be enforceable. That means if I want to transfer my bill of exchange to somebody else, that means it should possess some value or some consideration. In case of no consideration, I would not be able to transfer my bill or any other negotiable instrument. Moving on towards the next is negotiability. The negotiability of an instrument allows the transferee, that means person receiving the instrument, to acquire certain rights superior to those of transferor. That means negotiability allows transferee to have more rights or superior rights than the transferor. Now, what are the rights? First is holder in due course. A holder who takes the instrument for value in good faith and without notice any defect or claim. Next is enforceability. The holder in due course can enforce payment against all parties liable on the instrument. Next, let us talk about the legal framework of the same. That is Uniform Commercial Code, UCC. In the United States of America, Article 3 of the UCC governs negotiable instruments. Bills of Exchange Act. In UK, the Bills of Exchange Act 1882 provides legal basis for negotiable instruments. I hope I'm clear with this thing. Then, this was under statutory protection. Statutory protection provides legal framework of the negotiable instruments. That means they are protected by statutory laws and regulations which provide rules for their creations, endorsement, transfer and enforcement. Let us talk about the protection. First is legal rights. Statutory laws protect the rights of holders in due course. Next is enforcement. That means it provides mechanism for enforcement of payment and resolution of disputes. So, we have discussed various features of negotiable instruments. Let us briefly talk about them. First is it is a written document. Second is promise or order to pay. Third is fixed amount of money. Fourth is order to pay or bearer. Fifth is transferability. Sixth is consideration. Seventh is negotiability. And eighth is statutory protection. Hence, negotiable instruments are essential tools in the financial and commercial world. Negotiable instruments facilitate the transfer of money and credit. The key features of negotiable instruments ensure that they are reliable, secure, and enforceable. By adhering to specific legal requirements, they provide clarity, protect the rights of holders, and support smooth financial transactions. Understanding these features is crucial for anyone involved in issuing, receiving, or handling negotiable instruments. I hope we have clearly discussed the features of negotiable instruments. Negotiable instruments. Negotiable instruments play a pivotal role in commerce, enabling the smooth transfer of financial obligations between parties. That means negotiable instruments facilitate the smooth flow of financial transactions between different parties. They are governed by specific laws and regulations to ensure their enforceability and reliability in commercial transactions. The primary types of negotiable instruments include promissory notes, bills of exchange, and checks. That means there are three types of negotiable instruments. First one is promissory notes, second is bills of exchange, and third is checks. Let us briefly discuss the three negotiable instruments. Then we will be discussing the details in the further lecture. A promissory note. First is promissory note. It is a written promise by one party, known as the maker, to pay a specific amount of money to another party, the payer. The promise can either be on demand or at a specific future date. Promissory notes are integral to various financial transactions, including loans and credit arrangements. That means a written document or a written promise by one party, known as the maker, to pay a specific amount of money to another party, the payee, either on demand or at a specific future date, is known as a promissory note. Promissory notes are very important to lay down financial transactions, including loans and credit arrangements. Let us briefly discuss the characteristics of promissory notes. We'll be studying the details of all the three negotiable instruments further in this lecture. But first, let me briefly explain you the characteristics of promissory notes. First, it's a written document. A promissory note must be in writing and signed by the maker. That means it's a written promise and is duly signed by its maker. Second is the unconditional promise. The promise to pay the specific amount must be unconditional without any contingencies. Third is specified amount. The note must specify a definite amount of money to be paid. That means whatever the sum the person or the maker has promised to pay must be specifically laid down. Next is payable to a specific person. Initially, a promissory note is payable to a specific person or entity, although it can be transferred through endorsement. That means it is transferable through endorsement, but it is payable to a specific person or entity. That means it contains the name of the payer. Next is the maturity date. The note specifies whether the payment is due on demand or at a future date. That means the sum can either be demanded or is payable at a specific future date. Let us briefly talk about the uses of promissory note. First is personal loans. Individuals often use promissory notes when borrowing money from friends, family, and private lenders. The note provides a clear record of the loan terms, repayment schedule, and interest rate if it is applicable. That means promissory notes are often used to borrow money from friends, family, or private lenders. This note provides a record of loan terms, repayment schedule, and interest rate. Next is commercial loans. Businesses use promissory notes to secure short-term financing. That means we can borrow short-term loans through promissory notes. They are common tool for managing cash flow. That means commercial loans can be used to maintain or to manage cash flow, to fund operations and capital investments. Next is installment payments. Promissory notes are used in installment sale agreements where the buyer agrees to make periodic payments over time. So, the three uses of promissory notes are seeking or taking personal loans, commercial loans, and installment payments. Let us talk about legal implications of promissory notes. Promissory notes are legally binding contracts enforceable in court. They must meet specific requirements to be considered valid under the law. These include a clear promise to pay the amount and date of payment, the names of parties involved, and the signature of the maker. Failure to meet these requirements can render the note enforceable. Hence, promissory notes can be defined as legally binding contracts in the courts. Promissory notes can be transferred through endorsement, which involves the payee signing the back of the note. The new holder of the note is known as the endorsee, who gains the rights to receive payments. This transferability makes promissory notes versatile financial instruments. Hence, promissory notes can be defined as written documents that can be transferred through endorsement by signing the name of the person to whom we are going to endorse at the back of the note. Next is bill of exchange. A bill of exchange is also a type of negotiable instrument. A bill of exchange is an unconditional written order by one party, known as the drawer, directing another party, known as the drawee, to pay a specified sum of money to a designated third party, known as the payer. That means, in bills of exchange, there are three parties involved. First one is the drawer, second one is the drawee, and the third one is the payer. Bills of exchange are crucial in both domestic and international trade, providing a reliable method of payment between parties in different locations. Hence, bill of exchange can be defined as a written order by the drawer directing the drawee to pay a specified sum of money to the payer. It is important in both international as well as national trade. Let us briefly discuss about the characteristics of bills of exchange. Similar to the promissory note, it is also a written document. So the first characteristic is written document. A bill of exchange must be in writing and signed by the drawer. Second, unconditional order. That means the order to pay the specified sum must be unconditional. Third, specified amount. That is, the bill must state a definite amount of money. Fourth, three parties involved. That means a bill of exchange involves three parties, unlike promissory note. That is, the drawer who issues the promissory note, the drawee who pays the amount, and the payee who is the recipient of the specific sum. Last characteristic is payable on demand or at a future date. Like promissory note, a bill of exchange can either be demanded or the payment is received at a future date. So, the basic characteristics of bills of exchange is it's a written document, it's an unconditional order to pay, it bears a specified amount, there are three parties involved, and it is payable either on demand or at a future date. Let us briefly discuss about the uses of bills of exchange. The first use is international trade. Bills of exchange are commonly used in international trade to facilitate payments between exporters and importers. They provide a secure method of ensuring that the exporter receives payments once the goods are delivered. That means bills of exchange are commonly used in international trade to facilitate the payments between importers and exporters. Bills of exchange provide a secure method to ensure that the exporter receives payment once the goods are delivered. Second is domestic trade. It is also used in the domestic trade that takes place within a country. Businesses use bills of exchange to manage credit transactions, offering suppliers the assurance of payment at a future date. Next is banking and finance. Banks may use bills of exchange in various financial transactions, including discounting and rediscounting of bills, where the banks advances money to the holder of the bill before its maturity date. So, the three uses of bills of exchange is: it is used in international trade, it is used to trade between the boundaries of the country, that is domestic trade, and it is used in various banking and financial purposes like discounting and rediscounting of bills. I hope the characteristics and uses of bills of exchange is clearly understood. Now let us talk about the legal implications of bills of exchange. Bills of exchange are governed by laws. The laws provide a framework for their creation, endorsement, and enforcement. For example, in the United States, the Uniform Commercial Code, that is UCC, outlines the legal requirements for the bills of exchange. In the United Kingdom, the Bills of Exchange Act 1882 provides similar regulations. That means bill of exchange are governed by laws providing framework for their creation, endorsement, and enforcement. The drawer of the bill of exchange can transfer it to another party through endorsement. That means bill of exchange can be transferred to another party through endorsement. The endorsee gains the right to collect payment from the drawer. That means the endorsee becomes the rightful owner of the bill and receives the payment from the drawer. This transferability makes bill of exchange a flexible instrument for managing trade and credit. That means bill of exchange is an instrument that is flexible and manages trade and credit efficiently and effectively. If the drawer refuses to honor the bill, the holder can seek legal recourse. The drawer may be held liable for any dishonored bills, and the holder can take legal actions to enforce payment. Hence, bill of exchange is a written document that is an order to pay a specific sum of money, and if the drawer refuses to honor the bill, the holder can seek legal recourse for the same. Moving on towards the next negotiable instrument is checks. Checks or a check is a specific type of bill of exchange which is drawn on a bank and it is payable on demand. Checks allow individuals and businesses to make payments directly from their bank accounts to others. Checks are widely used for everyday transactions, offering a convenient and secure method for transferring funds. That means a check is a specific type of bill of exchange which is drawn on bank and it is always payable on demand. It allows the individuals or businesses to make payments directly from their bank accounts. Let us discuss about the characteristics of checks in brief. First is written document or a written order. A check must be in writing and signed by the drawer. That means it's a written document and should be duly signed by its drawer. Second is the unconditional order. That means the order to pay the amount bearing in the check must be unconditional or without any contingencies. Third is specified amount. The check must state a definite amount of money. That means a specific sum of money should be mentioned in the check. Payable on demand. That means unlike bills of exchange, checks are always payable on demand. Drawn on bank. Checks are drawn on a specific bank where the drawer has an account. For example, if I have established a bank account in HDFC Bank, I will draw the check on that bank only. Then, three parties involved. A check involves the drawer, that means the issuer, the drawee, that means the bank, and the payee, who is the recipient of the money. Hence, the five characteristics of checks are, it's a written order, it's an unconditional order to pay the specified amount of sum, it bears a specified amount of money to be sent, it is payable on demand, it is drawn on a bank, there are at least three parties involved, that is the drawer, the drawee, and the payee. Let us discuss briefly about the uses of checks. First is personal transactions. Individuals use checks to pay bills, make purchases, and transfer funds to others. They offer a secure alternative to carry large amounts of cash. That means individuals use checks to pay bills and make purchases and transfer funds to others. They offer a secure alternative to carry large amounts of cash. Second is business transactions. Businesses use checks for various purposes, including paying the suppliers, employees, and contractors. Checks provide a clear record of transactions, which is essential for accounting and auditing purposes. Third is bank transfers. Checks facilitate bank transfers, allowing customers to move funds between accounts or send money to others. Hence, the three uses of checks are personal transactions, business transactions, and bank transfers. Let us briefly discuss the legal implications of checks. Checks are governed by specific laws that ensure their enforcement. In the United States, the UCC outlines the requirements for checks, while the Checks Act 1957 governs them in the United Kingdom. These laws provide a framework for the creation, endorsement, and enforcement of checks. To be valid, a check must meet certain legal requirements, including the names of the parties involved, the amount of money, the date, and the signature of the drawer. Any discrepancy can render the check invalid. Endorsement of checks allows for their transfer to another party. Blank endorsements, where the endorser simply signs the back of the check, make it possible to the bearer. Special endorsement, specifying a particular person, transfer the checks to that person. If a bank dishonors a check due to insufficient funds or other reasons, the payee can take legal actions to recover the amount. Dishonored checks can have serious legal consequences for the juror, including penalties and damage to their credit rating. So to conclude, I would say that negotiable instruments such as promissory notes, bills of exchange, and checks are essential tools in commerce, facilitating the transfer of financial obligations between different parties. They provide a reliable and secure method of payment supported by specific laws and regulations that ensure their enforcement. So, promissory note is used for various financial transactions, providing a clear record of loan terms and repayment schedules. They require an unconditional promise to pay a specific amount of money. Bills of exchange is crucial in international and domestic trade involving three parties, allowing for the secure transfer of funds between different locations. They provide an unconditional order to pay a specified amount of money. Checks are widely used in everyday transactions, offering convenient and secure method of payment directly from the bank accounts. They are always payable on demand and drawn on a specific bank. Understanding the characteristics, uses, and legal implications of these negotiable instruments is crucial for anyone who is involved in financial transactions. They not only facilitate smooth financial operations but also provide legal protections and assurance for payment, making them indispensable in the modern financial systems. I hope the concept of negotiable instruments and the types of negotiable instruments is clearly